together to imagine and to innovate. This hasn't changed. What's possible has. We create technology that makes our world better. Ideas that move us, empower, and connect us. But great ideas cannot thrive alone. They need to be shared, challenged, refined. Through our insight and collective curiosity, we advance and grow. New solutions, new directions, new answers. We do that here, together. This is the age of connected intelligence. Welcome to the IQ era.
Good afternoon, everyone. Attention? Good. How's it going for the day? Day 3, everyone? Everybody awake? Awesome, awesome. So we have an interesting topic. The talk last couple of days has been around AI. And AI is now infused into everything and commercialized and real. I have a phenomenal panel today around private 5G, how successful it is, what do you see in the market as the growth opportunities, and how the ecosystem is evolving. So we'll have a diverse perspective from the teams. About myself, my name is Lalit Kashyap. I lead Wipro's telecom, media, and technology global consulting. New Jersey is home for me, and I'm a passionate telco proponent, and as I'm learning more, I'm sure there'll be some learnings in this session as well for all of you. So with that, I would invite, firstly, Asa on the stage. If you could come for introductions, please.
Wow, what an introduction, thank you. So I'm Asa Thompson, I'm heading up Enterprise Wireless Solutions for Ericsson. So we basically one of Ericsson's strategic business units really focused on driving growth of cellular, but I think important, assurance networking. So I'm thinking about networking that really makes sure any operational environment always works and that can be trusted. And we serve 36,000 customers across retail, finance, most industrial verticals, real estate. And obviously, we see a massive opportunity and are so excited to talk about private networks here today and the potential of that going forward. And especially now as we see AI moving into the physical world and into the operational realities of many, many companies. With that, looking forward to the conversation. Yeah.
Thank you. Juho, if you could come next, please. Fantastic.
Hey, my name is Juho Sarvikas. I'm the CEO of Inseego. I'm actually celebrating my 1-year anniversary here with all of you. So could not have picked a better location and a better audience and better discussion friends here to do that with. Inseego has been leading at the cutting edge of cellular wireless technology for over 25 years. We just rang the bell in NASDAQ at the end of last year. Couple of hallmarks that you might know us from already. We invented hotspot as a category. When millimeter wave came about, we were able to commercialize that as the first OEM in the industry. So really strong legacy of leading on the cutting edge of wireless. Our role is at the edge. And what we're focused on today is the enterprise wireless edge. So we provide the endpoints, whether it's mobile or fixed. In 5G routers, we provide the management and services software to enable enterprises to capitalize as 5G evolves towards 6G. We operate in the real world. I'm really looking forward to having discussions with the fellow panelists on what we see in concrete terms when it comes to 5G private network deployments and how AI will intersect and I believe even be an inflection point for private network deployment. So looking forward to a great discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam, if you could join us, please. Welcome. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lalit. Hi, I'm Parm Sandhu with NTT Data. I lead the global private 5G edge compute and edge AI business for NTT. So NTT, we do everything from data centers to the edge. That means connectivity, campus connectivity, and really our objective in existence is to help our clients deliver business outcomes. 75% of the Fortune 100 companies are our clients, and we provide managed network services all the way to really delivering solutions across key verticals, and all the way, have lots of experience. Hopefully, we can share how we actually deliver, how we actually solve a client problem. So look forward to this session, and thank you, esteemed panelists, and thank you, Lalit.
Thank you. Well, no better start to the panel if I don't ask you perspective on AI. And what have you seen different from last year to this year? How about we start with that?
Well, I think one reflection, we had a massive breakthrough. Most of us, first of all, AI has been going on for a long time. But in 2022, with the availability to everyone, to be honest, of the language models, I think we've been on a journey since. And we've been from the language models to the agentic AI. I think what I've seen over the last year, and I would say increasingly so over the last 6 months, is really the importance of what I call physical AI. At the end of the day, if you want to scale the value of AI, you don't want that to only be contained in the software world.
Correct.
And it's two ways. If you want to have the insight, not only generic insights, but a language model is great, but you don't want the language teacher to decide how you configure the network. You actually want the networking competence to do that. Then you need to connect that to your proprietary domain competence, domain-specific competence and intelligence data. And some of that data actually exists out in people's brain, some in devices and assets that are still not lit up, not connected. And I think as we move to that space, you want to be able to gather that data, combine that with contextual data, but you also want any type of automation action that is happening and interacting with a robot or any physical device. It's very hard to get the full potential of AI. So I think for me, it's really the importance of physical AI and how we enable software and physical AI. And it's very clear that the topic we're going to talk about today is a core enabler of that.
Fantastic.
I think that's an excellent point. And if you look at the implications of what needs to happen for everything that you described to come to life, AI really needs to evolve for a computing architecture where training, inferencing, you can't do all of that in the cloud. The immediate gold rush, everybody was fine with the cloud. The return was massive. Cost was not a primary driver, right? But now you can see the capacity constraint that's already happening in the data centers, in addition to use cases emerging like physical AI, where you need to have at least the inferencing at the edge. So the big thing for me in this show is that the discussion has now moved from the cloud LLM space to what's the distributed architecture. What do you do at the edge on the UE? I don't know if you can call a robot a UE, but let's call it the UE. So what the UE does in itself, independent autonomy and decision making, but now you need to collaborate with other autonomous devices, pick like a logistics center or a harbor for that matter, which are two, I guess, classic deployment examples. So you also need to have a local compute resource in addition to the UE. And then, of course, the cloud is going to be there, right? You'll have workloads that you want to do in the cloud. And that whole architecture that's required to really capitalize on the next phase of AI has to be facilitated by new networking solutions as well.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah,
Varun?
I'm going to sort of make a couple points, somewhat maybe a little bit controversial, but AI, in NTT's vision on AI is it's got to be in everything we do, just part parcel of what we do and what we is just natural, really drive the adoption. Our CEO is our chief AI innovation officer, so that was really wanted to set that vision. Being a Japanese company, it's about how we use AI, how we enable AI for good, for society, for business outcomes. And that's really the objective that I think we need to recognize. At the end, there's people who it's going to affect. The adoption is definitely growing, lots of excitement, but real hardcore adoption is still relatively early stage. I do agree with my colleagues that AI sort of cloud is progressing, but this new AI at the edge is really going to be the next big thing. What that then introduces is these AI models running at the edge, which creates all kinds of different problems that companies haven't even figured out what it is. I give you an example. I was talking to a client of ours, and they're like, "Hey, we built 80 models, and we're building a model a week." And I'm like, "Okay, great. How are you managing these? How are you orchestrating these? How are you managing all the different types of hardware?" As you said, that there's small boxes, big boxes, large boxes, GPU, not GPU. And when you actually think about it, that's a huge security management problem.
Yeah.
It's like the same problem that applications created 20 years ago. So I think that's creating new opportunities, but I do see a lot of excitement. I think a friend of mine was telling me the other day, and I think I was talking to Osa as well, we have two choices, right? We can continue to do what we're doing and just reduce the workforces and drive value, or we can actually take this thing and really drive new growth and new opportunities. So I think we all want to be on the new growth side of the curve. But I do see that we still have a long way to go, but it's really exciting to see what's happening, especially on the edge.
No, awesome. And see, what I realized is AI is the new workload, and it will increase, expand, and probably multiply.
Yes.
And there were a lot of interesting topics, discussions in this meet about the different ways to connect as well. And the complexity it creates for enterprises. And there was one convergence point that I realized is network is going to be the control plane of the future, which will control the workloads. So it will be an interesting discussion as we dive into it. And maybe, Juho, I'll start with you. How do enterprises see private 5G adoption currently? A lot of promises were there. And we see now it's spiking up. So how do you see the market? How do you see the inflection point in the market with private 5G?
I think it's very interesting. I remember, what was the first MWC after the pandemic? 2021 or 22? I'm going to go with
22.
I'll go with your 22. We'll say 22.
Or maybe it was just we weren't here until 22.
We will fact check that later. We'll say 22. The whole discussion was about private 5G, and it's amazing, and it's happening at scale, and a hype cycle. I don't think it was the first private hype cycle, but that was another hype cycle, right? But now what had happened is that there were significant benefits already. So you had obviously reliability, latency. For me, the biggest difference compared to a Wi-Fi network, which is like basically what we compare it to, is really more the mobility. And if you look at where the deployments ended up happening in that cycle, ended up being situations where you have a high degree of factory automation. That's a classic example. Harbors, that's everybody, like you ask, like, what's your leading deployment? It's a harbor or something to that extent. But you also had large like retailers or warehouse needs deploying private 5G. The issue became though that it's extremely cost prohibitive if you compare that to a Wi-Fi network. So you actually take a massive trade-off to avoid the cost, depending on how much value you can extract from the use case, and then the complexity. Because the deployments are not exactly out of the box ready, right? And then are they repeatable? So I think those were some of the key findings that I had, and I think that's pretty much where we are today. The big thing here is what we were already talking about as a part of the first question is, now you will have this requirement. You will need to have low latency connectivity. You will not need to have the reliability to capitalize on the physical AI and really expand the use cases from the obvious, more cloud-based space into private networks. So I'm personally very excited to see what will that adoption curve look like, because that should be an inflection point, in my opinion.
Sure. And do you see organizations looking at it rather than an isolated technology or connectivity solution to more a platform view for edge AI, how it is going to enable? Are you seeing that shift in the dialogue with the clients?
Yeah, and I honestly think that also, like, just from an industry standardization standpoint of view, interoperability standpoint of view, I still remember the early deployments where every UE was so difficult, and there was like, you just could not harmonize the deployment or onboard devices even in any systematic fashion. So definitely seeing that pick up more now as that complexity has been removed. And yeah, there's more and more use cases where you want to have on-prem or distributed processing as well.
Wonderful. I'll ask a question to you. You know, if, as you see the platform-centric approach with the organizations, how do you see wireless becoming the AI-enabled operation center for enterprises? How do you see this thinking changing of enterprises as you deal with them?
It's interesting because you mentioned control. Did you say control plane?
Plane.
I was laughing because my team been pushing. This becomes the control operating layer, like the control layer. And I said, well, enterprises want to be controlled. They don't want the network to be in control. But I think what really changes is, but I think you're right, and I actually think they're right. It's more about how we talk about it as a benefit from the enterprise. But I think the big change is, so far, if you look at wireless technology, Wi-Fi and cellular, in an enterprise context, this has been primarily communication and web browsing, right? It's been best effort. It's not really been the foundation for any critical operations. Yep. And when that now becomes, and we see where 5G technology, but also the maturity of 5G networks are today, and also what we see now as we take 6G and AI native networks already in 5G advanced to 6G, you actually have a completely different capability. It's not only connectivity, it's a deterministic platform that you can actually have intent-driven and programmatic. And I think that means that all of a sudden, the wireless network in an enterprise moved from being an afterthought or maybe a bit tactical to really strategic. Because all of a sudden, this actually determines how quickly you can scale AI applications, AI transformations. And it's not that often. If I go speak with customers today, and we have hundreds of deployment in private 5G work, many different verticals, we've seen a big shift that they go from this first little pilot to actually see a lot of those repeatable scaling. And the conversation is less about, I need connectivity or what coverage can I get? It increasingly gets to, how can I make sure that my operations is up and running with the right capabilities, with the right quality every time? And that's where the conversation, so it really fundamentally changed how we talk about wireless as a platform, as a technology, and a fundamental base layer in the networking operations. And when you do that, it's not that much about, although we love, in our industry, we love to talk RF design and spectrum and all the complexity that we manage to solve every day. But they don't want to hear about that. You want to talk about uptime. What are the applications that need that low latency? What are the AI engines can run out of the edge or need to run a cloud? Where do I have the bottleneck? And what are the things that needs to always be secure, maybe even isolated? And that's how you then design the network. And that needs to be policy-driven, not configure-driven. I think fundamentally change, and it makes it also extremely exciting for us as an industry. I mean, Ericsson been in this industry for 150 years. We created mobile technology. We're now taking 5G and 6G in, And we're having a really meaningful conversation on how we help transform enterprises, industries, and change people's lives. So
No.
it's
Wonderful. You know, it's so coherent. I had an enterprise client yesterday on the panel, and he's heard spectrum, technology shifts, etc. And he said, what I care for is the operational discipline.
yes,
How do you deliver the outcomes?
Yeah.
That's what matters to me.
Yeah.
And Perm, over to you. You know, as you
Yeah.
see the shift, have you seen the enterprise deployment approaches change? How are enterprises dealing with the shift in mindset? If you could reflect on it.
Yeah, I mean, as Osa eloquently outlined, you know, we're starting to see enterprises now who are deploying networks as foundational, more strategic, as part of their evolution. You know, as we said, you know, AI, physical AI, autonomous robots, AMRs, companies that are looking at 5G as foundational, private networks as foundational, not just looking for that one use case that's going to justify the ROI, but really making strategic decisions. So I think we're starting to see that shift. We are starting to see also, you know, specific industries saying, okay, they're all moving in that. Because I think that's what we see, like aviation, we're starting to see massive adoption across aviation. In manufacturing, I think it's still, you know, certain verticals and they're working through it. But obviously, we've always had private networks in mining for a long time.
Yeah.
But they were really just for communication, right?
Yeah.
They were just get voice. We have no connectivity. We just safety. But now, you know, with AI, remote and autonomous vehicles, remotely operated, we've integrated NTT's IOWN with private 5G. Nishimatsu, which is we won a nice award for that. It was a very interesting where somebody could be sitting 100, 150 kilometers away and operating, you know, heavy construction equipment with 5G at the end of it, right? So I think we're starting to see more and more endpoints that are AI enabled, like autonomous people movers in airports, baggage handling carts. We're starting to see AMRs now coming with private 5G, and even in Seago, I remember you when I was working with your team to even get a modem to connect 5G a few years. This is like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think there's a shift. Now, the other big shift that I'm starting to see, and I think some of you may be aware, is that the end points, like laptops and end devices, are coming with AI accelerators in them. So, you know, HP's launched some new products. Dell has launched some new products. And the purpose of that is the workloads that are going to be running on those are going to be enabled to make the workforce more productive, better responsiveness from AI running at the edge. Well, all of those devices, so if you think about an HP with an accelerator in it, you know, Qualcomm chipset or whatever, they need that reliable connectivity, right? Windows or, you know, any of these endpoints. So that AI is going to be running on that end tablet that we have. That is going to make the workforce so much more productive. They're going to be able to have, you know, not necessarily large language models, but even more what we call sort of small language models that can help a worker. So one of the items that we've done is, you know, a small 15 million sort of parameter model running on a Cradlepoint device where, you know, as you deploy these edge devices, they need support.
Yeah.
How do you manage them? If you put hundreds of these out there, and you know, there's not a technician working in a retail or in a, you know, a factory everywhere. So we made it very simple that you can actually just query the modem and say, okay, well, is my backhaul link congested or not? And that's where network intelligence and edge intelligence come together. And we see that as foundational.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, we'll get into a little bit of, you know, how are companies doing installations and all of that, and networks are becoming very much, I would call it an extension of the IT land today. And that's what I really am positive about, because I don't think we ever think of a Wi-Fi network as anything different than a LAN extension. And I think 5G is becoming, private networks are becoming that same thing, that an IT organization doesn't have to think about this as something outside their firewall, which was in the beginning. I mean, I'm telling you, at the beginning when we started, they were putting, well, let's put a firewall between this and then, we'll open up applications. Now we're really much designing it right from the beginning as part of that. And I think that's going to drive a big shift.
I think the excellent point in terms of private networks used to be built or initial phase for a point use case. So you'd have one single use case that you're solving for. And of course, from an ROI standpoint of view, very difficult to deliver on that. Now, if you use it as a platform and expand to multiple use cases, your ROI increases with that. One of the things that I saw when I was in my previous role at Qualcomm, the 5G or cellular connectivity is not super pervasive in the UE, right? Yeah, everything is Wi-Fi enabled, but you can actually find 5G in many of the key UE categories that you need, for example, for industrial automation. Or in the earlier stage of 5G, extremely cost prohibitive. So that has also been partially solved for by now with RedCap, right? So you get the reduced capability, you can cut the tax on the UE, maybe to a third. And of course, eRedCap is around the corner. So depending on the category of device and use case, that should also help in itself to makes the business case work for a broader portfolio of use cases and for the platform in itself.
No, wonderful. And you're part of ecosystem for all telcos. You go through them as a channel to market. So it's an ecosystem that everybody is developing. So how do you see the product ecosystem developing in the new market, number one? And what do you think should get better as well?
I think the biggest thing that I see is the complexity for an enterprise to consume or adopt the private network. Even just from the roles and responsibilities in the ecosystem. So also I know that you can basically drop ship a private network, right? And then from a carrier standpoint of view, like how does the roles and responsibilities work? The out-of-the-box readiness.
That's actually my partner who delivers, make sure it runs every time.
But that's like key part, which I think maybe took some time to create models that a business model, a delivery model that works at scale. The second part is just the out-of-the-box readiness. Like I think your point on well, the UE doesn't connect, right? And then you need to do bespoke implementations just to get the basics up and running. So that barrier for me is perhaps the biggest thing that once removed, paired with this increased set of use cases, a better TCO, like it's infinitely better than alternative connectivity solutions, and it should be deployed at scale once those are addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that one of the biggest challenges was like the complexity of deploying networks. We've now got a client who's deploying, 100 networks a year, roughly. So, that has to be easy to do. They have to be able to do, 2 or 3 a month, or more than that to get to that number, right? So when you have those kind of numbers, you have to think about architecture, you have to think about simplicity, management and operation. So this is, I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited about what AI, what's in the operations and technology, making it easy to operate the networks, support them. The SI role of having choice of end devices, which we didn't have. And I think this is, the change that we see.
And I think, Parm, actually the former comment you made about the shift of also having AI-driven products, that's really, relate to that, right? Because if I look at where Ericsson putting investment right now, we're actually putting intent and AI capabilities in every piece of the networking stack. And that goes to the different layers in the architecture, even in a radio, to the core. Then for our products and how we package them, as we get those benefits from a huge and a leading R&D machine driving the latest both in 6G and 5G, already there we can start differentiate it by capabilities that we want access to from the radio on demand. So, that is one thing. But the other one is how you run it. This has been one of the drivers for why we move now. We've invested a lot in AI ops in our wireless WAN portfolio, the critical portfolio. We're bringing that now out live on a private cellular portfolio and soon also neutral host portfolio. And all of a sudden, you have a single software platform layer. And it's not only, it brings visibility, it brings simplicity and the AIOps capability for an enterprise, but it also helps for partners that we have like Entity Data who manage this on behalf of the other customers to bring that AIOps capability to managed service capability. And I think that's where we take it. I think we'll see more of that now in the next phase of deployments of these private networks. And that has been a barrier together, I would say, with the device ecosystem that is getting much better. But I would love to have the situation of the Wi-Fi ecosystem we have.
Yes.
With that said, I know also, we talk about Wi-Fi, next generation Wi-Fi, it also takes time until those devices come there. And I think the more we can reduce friction as an industry, it's been the cost, as as you mentioned also with RedCap, with big progress. But I think there are things like certification to different carriers, certification different types of,
It's cost
on different
prohibitive in
spectrum.
itself.
And,
Yeah.
and I think also, even if you've done that certification, we have, of course, massive test labs. We can pre-certify, pre-test devices. But even if you do that, in some cases, you actually need to show end-to-end that it really delivered the expected outcome. And there, I think, as an industry, we still have more to do. And I think it's exciting. There are players like Ericsson, Qualcomm, and some of the leading operators are working together to actually solve this. It just doesn't happen in 24 hours, but we're on it, and I think that's so fundamentally important.
Yeah, you can't exactly deploy a single template and expect all of the UEs to behave accordingly. The other thing that's very, very important is the enterprise user, right? So now you have the deployment done, you got the UEs to work excellent, you're performing the use cases. How does their IT manage it? Because you need to provide the manageability. And we were working with a large US retailer, and their CIO's feedback was like, I just want it to be as simple as Wi-Fi. Yeah. Like, I don't want to worry about anything, as easy as Wi-Fi. Please do that, and great.
Yeah. No,
there's some work to do on the ecosystem.
No, absolutely.
Sure.
And see, as the industry evolves, one is AI, the control plane is the second topic I picked up. Third was the economics. If you look at the end customers, they're worried. Is the model going to be more economical? Where the money is going to be spent? So right now, money is going on the compute. The subscriber charges, they want it lower, if you talk to any subscriber. So as the AI workloads are increasing, see, how are you thinking of the network architecture, the design principles as well? Because the data will expand, but it has to be economical as well in the end to execute for a telco or an operator. So.
I think you need to think about it holistically. So when we look at this, you need to look at the cloud architecture. You need to look at what can be processed and need to be processed and have an inference at the device edge. What can have at the, you could say, in-between edge, right? So, and we need to design not the network just to gonna push out the network. We actually designing the network so they can optimize that, the processing and then compute regardless of where it needs to happen. And I think what is exciting now, what we see with a lot of our research is we can actually use AI models to predict whether that workload is best, happening on the robot, at the edge device, private network, or out in the cloud. And I think that's also where you see players like Entity Data also building that, not only having the technical expertise, but also repeatable solutions for what are the processes and solutions you want to scale, say in a factory or a mine. I also think there's been a lot of a myth, to be honest, about Wi-Fi versus private cellular and the cost competitiveness. A Wi-Fi system doesn't deliver the same things and the same outcome as a private network. Yeah. It's clear already now, pure coverage, if you have a big site, total cost of ownership is better with an indoor solution, at least if you have an effective one as Ericsson, than if you go with a Wi-Fi system. If it's smaller and you just want communication, you should go with Wi-Fi. Yeah. But I think we need to kill or start obsess about the cost argument, because it's a strategic investment. And you need to think about the total outcome of that. Just take an example. So we're scaling our solution with Newmont, which is one of the leading gold mines in the world. They operate autonomous bulldozers, just like you described, Parm. And we have now connected about 200 sites in the world. We have connected the first wave. They used to have Wi-Fi, and with every hand, and they can operate one bulldozer covering 100 meters. We can, with one access point, cover 20 bulldozers, cover the whole open pit of 2 kilometers. That means there's no handovers. What happened before with a handover, there was a glitch, and sometimes that bulldozer stopped. And when that stopped, if you've been in a large open pit mine, it's huge, right? It's a big interruption, and the cost of an operational outage in that business is high. Then it's not, the business case is so clear, so now once we discover this, it's been selling itself. So I think the way we should think about it, you can think about TCO and coverage, but more importantly, what are the outcomes, and how can you ensure operations? So for me, it's more about you sell operational assurance, and in many industries, in many operations, that's actually fundamental and critical.
Sure. No, thank you. And Juho, if I look at you as a product organization, right? You're creating the boxes, working with the partners. How are your product roadmaps evolving as well? You see, it's no longer a 5-year planning cycle, no longer a 2-year planning cycle as well. So how are you evolving it based on the market currently?
I think there's multiple different tangents. That one, of course, is the cellular evolution, but let's set that aside. That's fairly obvious on how to think about it, what the implications are. From a AI perspective, there's of course the discussion on what does that mean for the networking experience, intelligent application traffic steering. You have key trends like satellite, multi-band link, extreme resiliency, which is required for AI, right? So like that is another aspect of it. So the product experience in itself is completely different than what it used to be, and that also informs your product planning. How do you run the processes to begin with? Because you will have to adapt quickly. Market is moving super fast.
Yeah.
Even more so in the cloud, of course. And then overall, from an AI workload standpoint of view, what is the right 50 tops was mentioned, or 50 tops or model sizing was mentioned here. Like, what are the workloads of the future? How do you right size for that? How do you have a scalable way of delivering compute resource? In our case, at the CPE, at the edge, what does that ecosystem look like? It's not like there's a LLM or a small language model or an app store that exists today, right? It's pretty easy. It's pretty basic where the ecosystem is today. So I expect that to also rapidly emerge in itself. And hopefully it's not going to be a walled garden. Hopefully it's going to be an open ecosystem where everybody can participate in, making exactly what we're discussing here a reality, and being a key enabler also for physical AI.
Sure. Let's go to rubber meets the road, deployments. So, Parm, I will bring you in. Looking at single site to multi-site to global deployments, what's the most complex dimension do you see in just scaling it out?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the integration into the enterprise and into the security to make the network just part of the security, the enterprise IT LAN. That's the foundation, because if that's not done right, you're going to create sort of this constant barrier to adoption of that network, from end devices to, all the way to applications. It has to be done right, security and all of those parameters that enterprise must have. I think is our number one always, and that has to come from the beginning and the foundation. It should be very seamless for the end customer to build an application from the device, as it is on Wi-Fi, as it is on their LAN, as on private network. It should not look any different for an enterprise. That's number one. Number two, creating standard sort of models. I mean, we work in the enterprise space, right? There's nothing standard. Every enterprise custom, and I look at it, but the level of standardization we can achieve, especially on a global scale, that's what enterprises want, especially global multinational companies. They want a global standard architecture that they can, repeat, everywhere. And that's why I think when we look at companies like Ericsson, they can actually help you with a global single type solution. They have, radio for this frequency band or this frequency band or this frequency band. That helps because I think that gives you that level of capability, and the enterprise feels confident, right? That they want and then the last thing I would make is they don't want the costs going into the operator of the network. They want the costs going into building new use cases and applications that deliver outcomes for them.
Yeah.
If it's too costly to operate, they're going to be putting the money into the wrong thing, right? So we need to make sure that these are easy to operate. And then I think the other part, I think as we all talked about here, is the device ecosystem. I'm really, really happy to hear from the device side that RedCap is coming, because that's awesome.
Yeah.
That has been one of the areas that have helped drive that. But what we're seeing is that more and more of our customers are starting to seed their device ecosystem with 5G.
Wonderful.
Right, which was the barrier before, because we put the network and they're like, well, I've already got these Zebra devices and they already have Wi-Fi, and now I need to switch them to 5G. Well, now they're actually looking at it the other way. They're buying devices with 5G, thinking, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to add it, because there is a cost, right? There's a cost on adding 5G to the device. So I think that is something that is hopefully going down, but it is there, right? That we need to be always thinking about. And that is a barrier.
And Asa, from your perspective, what should be a design principle? You sit in the organization, define, roll out the standards as well.
Yeah.
So what should be standard across the globe, let's say for a multinational?
It's a great question. I mean, if I could wish, it would be nice with one global spectrum. That would make a lot easier from a device. But unfortunately, that's not how the reality look like. But I think what is an amazing role we have as an industry, both Ericsson and our peers, is at least set standards so things can interoperate. And that is becoming increasingly so. And you see now, as we're moving into more 5G advanced network, they're AI native, and as we also transition into 6G, we have, of course, partnership with the broader ecosystem. It's not only the connectivity piece, it's the cloud, it's the compute, it's the AI workloads that we want to be able to run across this stack, and how to optimize that across. And we, of course, very much focus how we simplify the architecture also in our horizontal layer, whether it's, and I think that's important, whether it's public or private, and that's probably our strength. So we can bring that global standard, and then we can manage the configuration we needed with whatever radio for whatever spectrum, but the rest we can keep standard. So we can actually deploy solutions that works consistently and integrate consistently regardless where we are in the world. But I think the other dimension of that, what we see increasingly is, even if you connect a site or a mine or a factory, operation doesn't stop at the physical space where that factory is. You have logistic flows, you go indoor, outdoor. And I think what we are also building is a very consistent stack. We used to have bespoke, we had of course a standard, but it was often the CTOs of operators who dictate, this is how I want my network. We're driving more standardization also in how operators are driving networks, and that goes down to the core layer, so we can program and expose capabilities from the network in a consistent way. And that means that we can make sure the private networks interoperate better with the public. And that matters. If you have a hospital, you want that to not only work in the hospital, you want to have that quality slice all the way from wherever the ambulance is and come into the hospital. You want to have that compute AI insight vision from the get-go, and not have the first second with a patient starting when they come into the hospital. You can enable that when you have a standardized architecture and the capability both in the software layers, the network operating layer, but as we also now bringing, and our initiative Waduna and why we bought Vonage, we can also drop network APIs and that quality both in the public and the private environment. And I think this is going to be fundamental in an area that we foresee with hyper-connectivity as the baseline, and this should be as platform, easy to consume as any tech platform we have in the stack. So,
no, thank you for that. I would love to continue it for another hour. But
we should talk about this unified global spectrum policy. I think that would be a great panel in itself.
So let's do one thing. We need to end in 1 more minute. Quick fire. 10 seconds each. So Pam, I'll start with you. what do we underestimate?
I think we are underestimating what a private network can actually deliver, right? It's a telco network. And let me just, so I think what we need to think about is if you think about daily life, what your cellular network can do, we can do that for the enterprise. We can replace legacy voice systems. We always think about it just data. We can put IMS core on there. We've done that. So we can just, the amount of devices and use cases we can connect is endless. Yeah. And I think that's what we need to think about. It's not just a 5G network for connecting data. It does a lot more. Sure. And we're going to be able to do that in the ecosystem. It's just taking a little bit of time to get to that point. But, to me, that's what it is. We can put so much more on these networks.
Yuho, what's up?
How many seconds was it?
10 seconds, 10. But yeah.
Okay, I was wasted 5. So look, for me, it's the complexity. How do you eliminate the complexity? For the connectivity in itself, you have 3GPP, you have global collaboration bodies, so that will sort itself out. There's extreme progress that has already been made and partnerships like we've been discussing here on how to accomplish that. We should have the same happen also for this hybrid compute architecture. I'm not talking about running the network, I'm talking about the use cases and enabling and running those workloads. So if you had that plug and play, the ROI would be a much tougher, much easier problem to solve for.
Wonderful. And last one to you. Is the future bright?
The future is bright, and I'm so happy. One of our tech SI partners actually have that, and go-to-market partners have that. That's their slogan. So yes, the future is bright.
Okay.
However, I think I have a little bit maybe contrasting or complementing view on the barrier, and I see it already today. The difference between those that are scaling it and those that don't. Yeah. It's the classic theme that we've been talking about for decades of why digital transformation is not going faster, and frankly, it's not a technology problem. We can deploy a private cell network in a day. We can bring the right parties together and implement it. I think just the actual complexity of changing behavior, operating model in something that is working in a certain way and make the company move. And you see that when you see AI native, 5G native companies coming up and how they design, if we look at how we would design a factory, it's very different than if you don't think about that or don't have that. It's also the difference between those customers I have today that really implement and reap the benefit across all operational flows versus just running one use case in a corner. And I think that is not a technology problem. Yes, there are technology barriers to overcome, but it's the classic transformation and change challenge, because this is a massive change for companies. It's a massive shift in how we run and operate business and processes. It's even changed in the role of people in the organization. And that doesn't happen overnight if you're not a startup seeing the opportunity of changing that in this era.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I wish it would have run longer, but thank you so much. It was insightful, and I love this panel.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.